was trying to protect you!
Protect us from what?
3 people spent 11 years arguing about a voicemail. None of them had ever listened to it. The message was only 18 seconds long. 18 seconds. That's less time than it takes to pour a cup of coffee. Less time than most people spend deciding what to watch next. And yet those 18 seconds became the most important thing in the Harper family. Not because anyone knew what the voicemail said. Because nobody did. The notification sat untouched on an old phone. Year after year. Move after move. Argument after argument. The phone remained in a cardboard box in the back of a closet. Waiting. The strange thing is that there was only one person who knew why nobody ever listened to the voicemail. And for 11 years. She never told anyone. But before we get there, we need to talk about Daniel Harper. Because the tragedy wasn't that Daniel died. The tragedy was that everyone thought they had more time. And if you've ever put off a conversation because you assumed there would be another chance tomorrow, this story might stay with you. Before we continue, I have a question. Have you ever ignored a call from someone and told yourself, I'll call them back later? Let me know in the comments. And if stories that make you think are your kind of stories, don't forget to subscribe and join us inside Echoes before goodbye. Now let's begin. 11 years earlier. Daniel Harper was 54 years old. The kind of man people trusted immediately. Not because he was charming. Because he was dependable. If Daniel said he'd be there at 6 o'clock, he arrived at 5:55. If he promised to help you move, he showed up with a truck. If he said he'd fix something, somehow it got fixed. Daniel had spent most of his life solving problems. Fixing things. Repairing relationships. Keeping peace. Sometimes he wondered if anyone noticed how tired he was. But he never said it aloud. Because somewhere deep down, Daniel believed it was his job to hold everyone together. For 31 years he had been married to Claire. Together they had raised 2 children. Ethan and Sarah. From the outside, they looked like a family that had figured life out. The reality was more complicated. Families rarely break all at once. They drift apart slowly. One misunderstanding at a time. One missed conversation at a time. One postponed apology at a time. And the Harper family had been drifting for years. Especially Daniel and Ethan. Ethan was 32. A successful attorney living 3 states away. He worked long hours. Made good money. And called home less often than he used to. Not because he didn't care. Because life got busy. Or at least that's what he told himself. The truth was harder to admit. Every conversation with his father felt like a reminder of everything he wasn't. Ethan spent years chasing achievements he thought would finally impress his father. Law school. Promotions. Awards. Yet every time Daniel simply said, "That's great, son," Ethan somehow left feeling emptier than before. Deep down he carried a belief he'd never admitted aloud. Maybe nothing he did would ever be enough. Daniel had spent his life building things with his hands. Ethan spent his days sitting behind conference tables. Daniel understood practical problems. Ethan lived in contracts and courtrooms. Claire noticed it long before either of them did. Mothers usually do. She'd sit at the dinner table and watch conversations shrink. Watch calls become shorter. Watch birthdays become texts. Watch holidays become obligations. Nobody was fighting. But nobody was really talking either. And that's the dangerous thing. Most people think relationships end with an explosion. Sometimes they end with silence. Meanwhile, Sarah remained close to her father. Losing their mother young had left a mark she never talked about. Sarah learned early that people leave. Sometimes by choice. Sometimes not. Either way, they leave. She spent years pretending that fear wasn't there. She lived only 20 minutes away. Visited often. Called almost every day. If Daniel needed help, Sarah was there. If Sarah needed advice, Daniel answered. At least that's what everyone believed. But Sarah was carrying something nobody knew about. A secret she'd been dragging around for nearly 11 years. And Daniel was the reason. We'll come back to that. Because understanding Sarah's secret is the key to understanding everything that happened later. Including the voicemail. Especially the voicemail. The summer before Daniel died was unusually hot. The kind of heat that made people stay indoors. The kind that made afternoons feel heavier than normal. One Saturday evening, the family gathered for Daniel's birthday. Nothing fancy. Just dinner. Cake. The usual stories everyone had heard 100 times before. For a few hours things felt normal. Maybe even good. Daniel laughed. Claire smiled more than she had in months. Sarah seemed relaxed. Even Ethan had flown in from Chicago. At one point Daniel looked around the table and said something nobody paid much attention to at the time. Funny how that happens. The moments that matter rarely announce themselves. They slip past unnoticed. Daniel raised his glass and smiled. You know, he said, I wish we did this more often. Everyone nodded. Everyone agreed. And nobody did anything about it. Looking back, Ethan would replay that moment more times than he could count. Because it was one of the last truly happy memories they shared. 3 weeks later, everything changed. The call came on a Tuesday morning. Daniel had collapsed while running errands. By the time help arrived, it was too late. No warning. No goodbye. No final family gathering. Just an ordinary morning that suddenly wasn't ordinary anymore. The news hit each member of the family differently. Claire stopped speaking for almost 2 days. Sarah cried until she physically couldn't anymore. Ethan booked the first available flight home. Then sat in an airport terminal staring at his phone. Reading old text messages. Looking for something. Anything. A final conversation. A hidden meaning. Proof that he had been a better son than he feared. But grief has a cruel way of rewriting memories. Suddenly every missed call feels important. Every postponed visit feels permanent. Every, I'll do it next week, becomes something you'll never get the chance to do. At the funeral, people filled the church. Former co-workers. Neighbors. Friends. People Daniel had helped over the years. The stories sounded remarkably similar. He was always there when I needed him. He never asked for anything in return. He was one of the good ones. Claire heard those words over and over. And every time she did, she felt something tighten in her chest. Because she wasn't thinking about the Daniel everyone else knew. She was thinking about the conversation they never finished. The conversation interrupted 3 nights before he died. The conversation that still kept her awake 11 years later. And if she had known what was sitting on Daniel's phone, she might have listened to it immediately. But she didn't know. Not yet. Nobody did. Not until 2 days after the funeral. When Sarah discovered something that changed everything. An old phone. 1 missed call. And an unheard voicemail. 18 seconds long. A voicemail that would divide the Harper family for the next 11 years. And the worst part? The message wasn't even meant to cause pain. It was meant to do the exact opposite. 2 days after the funeral, Sarah found the phone. At first, it didn't seem important. Daniel had owned several phones over the years. Most were sitting in drawers somewhere. Old devices nobody had bothered to throw away. This one had slipped between the cushions of his recliner. The chair where he'd spent countless evenings watching baseball. The chair nobody had touched since he died. Sarah found it while helping Claire clean the house. The battery was dead. The screen cracked. Ordinary. Forgettable. Until she plugged it in. And saw the notification. One unheard voicemail. Received the morning Daniel died. Sarah stared at the screen. Then read it again. One unheard voicemail. Received 8:14 a.m. 37 minutes before Daniel collapsed. Her stomach tightened. For a moment she just sat there. The charger hanging from the wall. The phone warming in her hands. The realization settling in. Someone had called. Or maybe Daniel had called someone. And somehow there was still a message nobody had heard. The first person she told was Claire. The second was Ethan. That was the moment the trouble started. Because grief does strange things to people. It turns questions into obsessions. And suddenly everyone had the same question. Who was the voicemail for? The answer should have been simple. But it wasn't. The phone was locked. The notification showed a voicemail. Nothing more. No name. No contact. No explanation. Just 18 seconds. 18 mysterious seconds. And somehow everyone immediately believed the message belonged to them. Claire thought it might be for her. There had been things left unsaid between them. 31 years of marriage creates unfinished conversations. Dreams postponed. Arguments paused. Apologies delayed. The night before Daniel died, they had disagreed about something small. At least it seemed small at the time. Now Claire couldn't remember exactly what started it. Only how it ended. Daniel saying, "We'll talk about it tomorrow." Tomorrow never came. And now she wondered if the voicemail contained the conversation they never got to finish. Ethan had a different theory. His relationship with Daniel had been complicated for years. Not bad. Not broken. Just unfinished. Like a bridge that never reached the other side. The last time they spoke had been 6 days before Daniel died. The conversation lasted 4 minutes. 3 of those minutes were silence. Afterward, Ethan sat staring at his phone feeling angry. At his father. At himself. At everything. Now all he could think was, maybe Dad called because he wanted to fix things. Maybe he finally said what he never knew how to say. Maybe the voicemail contained the words Ethan had spent years waiting to hear. Sarah never told anyone her theory. Because hers scared her. The secret she'd been carrying for 11 years involved Claire, and if the voicemail was meant for her there was a chance it contained something she wasn't ready to hear. For several days, the family discussed little else. Every meal. Every conversation. Every quiet moment. Eventually they took the phone to a repair shop. The technician charged it. Examined it. Then delivered unexpected news. The voicemail still existed. But the audio file was corrupted. Partially damaged. Recoverable. Maybe. The process could take weeks. Possibly months. Nobody expected that answer. Especially not Ethan. "What do you mean months?" he asked. The technician shrugged. Old devices are unpredictable months. The word settled over the family like fog. What Claire did next would cost the family another decade. But before I tell you what Claire did, I want to ask you something. If you found a voicemail from someone you loved who passed away, would you listen to it immediately? Or would you be afraid of what it might contain? Let me know below because what Claire chooses next divided viewers the first time I told this story. They had waited days already. Now they had to wait longer. And waiting gave people time to imagine. That's when the theories began. Claire imagined apologies. Ethan imagined approval. Sarah imagined forgiveness. The strange thing about grief is that it often reveals what people need most. Not what is true. What they desperately want to be true. And over the next several weeks, each family member built an entirely different version of Daniel's final message. Months passed. Then more months. The voicemail remained unrecovered. Life resumed. At least on the surface. But every so often someone would ask. Any updates? Any news? Any progress? The answer was always no. Until one afternoon nearly 7 months later. The repair shop called. The voicemail had been restored. The file was ready. The family could finally hear it. Sarah expected relief. Instead she felt fear. The same fear she saw in Claire's eyes. The same fear she heard in Ethan's voice. Because after months of imagining what the message might contain, the truth had become dangerous. Reality rarely competes with imagination. And suddenly nobody seemed eager to listen. A meeting was arranged at Claire's house. The phone sat in the middle of the dining table. Silent. Waiting. Almost everyone was there. Almost. Because one person never showed up. Claire. When Ethan called, she didn't answer. When Sarah knocked, she didn't open the door. When they finally reached her hours later, she said something neither of them expected. I'm not ready. The words stunned them. Not ready. The voicemail had been sitting there for months. What did she mean she wasn't ready? Claire didn't explain. She only repeated herself. I'm not ready. Weeks became months. Months became years. And every time the subject returned, Claire stopped it. Every single time. At first Ethan thought she was grieving. Then he thought she was avoiding reality. Eventually he became angry. The argument started quietly. Then grew louder. And louder. Until the voicemail became something much bigger than a message. It became a battlefield. A symbol. A wound. A question nobody could answer. Years passed. Birthdays came and went. Relationships changed. People moved. People aged. Still the voicemail remained unheard. Waiting. Year 11 arrived. And by then nobody realized something important. The voicemail wasn't the thing keeping the family apart. It was the excuse. And if you're still here, you're exactly the kind of person these stories are written for. Thank you for spending your time with us. The real problem had begun long before Daniel died, long before the phone. Long before the message. The voicemail was simply covering an older wound. A wound that started 5 years before anyone found the phone. And there was only one person who knew the truth. Claire. The same person who had spent 11 years making sure nobody pressed play. Because Claire knew something the others didn't. Something Daniel had told her 3 nights before he died. Something that changed the meaning of the voicemail completely. And if Ethan and Sarah discovered it, they might never forgive her. Sarah finally speaks. Not Ethan. Not Claire. Sarah. Then Sarah says, this was never about the voicemail. Daniel died believing Sarah didn't forgive Claire. And Claire knew that. Years before Daniel died, Claire made a decision. One mistake. One selfish choice. One moment of pride. Whatever it is, it damaged the family. Not permanently. But enough. Daniel spent years trying to repair it. Sarah never fully let him. Not because she hated Claire, because she was hurt. Now both people are trapped. Daniel also expected more from Claire. Daniel waiting for forgiveness. Sarah waiting for an apology that feels sufficient. Claire grew up poor, she always wanted to become a journalist. Claire watched her own mother sacrifice dreams. Claire promised, "That won't be me." Claire spent most of her 20s watching other people chase dreams she secretly wanted for herself. Somewhere along the way she began believing something dangerous. That if she didn't take this opportunity, she might never matter in the way she'd always hoped. And once that belief takes root, sacrifice starts looking a lot like responsibility. Daniel was the only person who believed she could. Years later she finally gets an opportunity. A fellowship. A publishing program. Something huge. But accepting it means moving across the country. Daniel doesn't want her to go. Not because he's controlling. Because Sarah needed her at the time. Sarah is 14. Claire is almost a second mother to her. Their mother died years earlier. When Claire leaves for New York, Sarah takes it personally. Daniel warns Claire. She's not saying it, but she's taking this hard. Claire says, "It's just 2 years." Daniel says, 2 years. When you're 14 feels like forever. Claire leaves anyway. The whole time Claire was away. Claire promised she'd call. Visit. Stay involved. And she meant it. At least she thought she did. The first few months weren't terrible. There were phone calls. Video chats. Text messages. Plans. Promises. Then life happened. The fellowship became demanding. Deadlines multiplied. Opportunities appeared. Connections formed. Success arrived. And every time Sarah called, Claire became a little busier. A little harder to reach. A little more distant. At first Sarah noticed. Then she stopped mentioning it. Then she stopped calling. Daniel watched the entire thing happen. Powerless. By 16, Sarah was struggling. Her grades slipped. She stopped seeing friends. She isolated herself. Started skipping classes. Started making decisions that scared Daniel. One night she disappeared. Just for a few hours. But Daniel spent those hours driving through town looking for her. Terrified. When he finally found her sitting alone at a park bench after midnight, she was crying. And the first thing she asked wasn't, "Why are you here?" It was, "Did Claire call?" Daniel never forgot that. What Daniel never told Claire was that Sarah stopped asking after that night. Not because she stopped caring. Because she finally got her answer. When Claire finally came home 2 years later, she expected things to return to normal. Instead she found a house she barely recognized. And a stepdaughter who barely spoke. For months she blamed Sarah. Thought she was being dramatic. Thought she was holding a grudge. Until the night she and Daniel had the fight. The one neither of them ever recovered from. It started quietly. Most devastating arguments do. 3 nights before Daniel died, Claire sat at the kitchen table while Daniel stood by the sink. Neither of them had raised their voices. The conversation was quiet. Which somehow made it worse. Daniel looked tired. Older than she remembered. Sarah called today. Claire sighed. Daniel, no. Just listen. He rubbed his face. Do you know what she said? Claire didn't answer. She said she stopped telling you things because she was tired of feeling disappointed. The words landed harder than Daniel intended. Claire looked away. That's not fair. No. Daniel's voice cracked. Then tell me what is. For a moment neither spoke. Then Claire said the thing she'd been saying for years. I did what I had to do. Daniel nodded. Slowly. Painfully. I know. Claire blinked. The answer caught her off guard. I know you did. Daniel looked down at the floor. And if I'm being honest, I'm proud of what you built. Silence. But that isn't what Sarah needed. Claire felt anger rising. Nobody ever talks about what I gave up. Daniel laughed. Not because it was funny. Because he was exhausted. Claire. He looked at her. Directly. For many years you've talked about what it cost you to leave. His voice softened. Have you ever stopped to ask what it cost Sarah when you did? Daniel said, you got your dream. Claire immediately heard criticism. I came back, didn't I? Daniel looked exhausted. Not angry. Just tired. The kind of tired that takes years to earn. Yeah, he said. After she spent 2 years wondering if she mattered enough. The words hit harder than shouting ever could. Claire felt her chest tighten. Because the painful truth wasn't that Claire left. Part of her remained somewhere else. Always chasing the next deadline. The next opportunity. The next version of herself. And Sarah felt it. Every single day. Years passed. Nobody talked about it. Not honestly. Then Daniel died. And suddenly there wasn't enough time anymore. Sarah finished speaking. The room felt smaller. Heavier. Ethan looked toward Claire. For the first time understanding something he'd missed for years. This wasn't about one voicemail. This was about time. The years they thought they had. The conversations they postponed. The apologies delayed by pride. The love everyone assumed would still be there tomorrow. Then Claire finally spoke. Her voice barely above a whisper. I knew. Nobody moved. I knew that's what the voicemail was probably about. Tears filled her eyes. I knew if we listened to it, she stopped. Tried again. I knew your father would probably tell us the same thing he'd been trying to tell us for years. The room fell silent. Then Claire looked at the phone. And for the first time in 11 years she said, play it. And Ethan pressed the button. The recording crackled. Distorted. Old. Then Daniel's voice filled the room. For the first time in 11 years. Hey Claire, a pause. Static. It's me. Another pause. Then a soft laugh. The same laugh everyone remembered. Listen, I know everybody's busy. I know life gets complicated. A breath? If you're hearing this before I get home. Stop waiting. Sarah doesn't need a perfect apology. She just needs you. Call her. Tell her you're proud of her. Static. Then the final words. Life's shorter than we think. A beat. Love you. Click. 18 seconds. That was all. No secret inheritance. No shocking revelation. No hidden confession. Just a man who understood something his family didn't. That pride feels important until time runs out. After the voicemail. Ethan sat staring at the phone. For 11 years he had convinced himself the voicemail contained approval. Some final validation. Some hidden proof that his father was proud of him. Instead Daniel spent his final message worrying about his family. Not achievements. Not careers. Not success. Family. And suddenly Ethan understood something. Maybe his father had been proud all along. Maybe Ethan had spent years chasing words that were already there. There was a brief moment of silence then. Sarah says, "I don't know if I'm ready to forgive you." Claire says, "I know. I wouldn't forgive me either." The room filled up with quiet tears. Sarah walks over, sits beside her. Neither of them said another word. They simply sat there. The phone still resting on the table between them. The same phone that had stolen 11 years. And for the first time nobody was afraid of it anymore. Not full forgiveness. Not yet. But possibility. That feels true. Because the voicemail was never powerful because of what Daniel said. It was powerful because of what happened after nobody listened. For 11 years they had lost more time. The one thing Daniel was trying to save. And that's when Claire finally broke. Not because she heard her husband's voice. But because she realized something devastating. The voicemail had arrived too late for Daniel. But it hadn't arrived too late for them. Pride feels important until time runs out. 3 people lose 11 years because each of them is waiting for the other person to make the first move. The saddest thing about time isn't that it runs out. It's that most people don't realize they are wasting it until it's gone. Before you leave, I want to ask you one final question. Who is someone you've been meaning to call? Don't write the reason. Just write their first name. And maybe after this story, make the call.